Is UFC BJJ a game changer? Well, at first glance, Ross, who is doing another solo Jiu Jitsu pod while my co host Callum is away traveling, I'm a little bit underwhelmed with what I've read and heard so far about the UFC BJJ promotion. If you already have thoughts on it, jump into the comments right away and let me know. The comments really help the pod, and I like engaging with them and get plenty of ideas from them. So please comment if you can, if you've already made up your mind about UFC BJJ. If you want to know a little bit more about it, stay here because I'll try and set the scene, and then I'll give some of my thoughts along the way as well. But when it first came out, when it was first announced, I was away. Hence, it's been a few days since the news broke about the UFC BJJ promotion. So what I did was I came home, caught up with all the jiu-jitsu news, and then thought I'd get on the podcast and share some thoughts on it. So we know the first UFC BJJ event is going to be Wednesday, June 25. UFC's already had an involvement with BJJ through the Fight Pass Invitational events that they've put on, but now they're branding it as UFC BJJ. So this show is going to have 3 title matches. One match is going to be a match between 2 coaches who are going to be heading up a reality TV show that's going to play up until the event. So the show Road to the Title starts Monday, June 16, and I believe there's going to be daily episodes up until Wednesday, June 25. What is Road to the Title? We're going to have one team coached by Mikey Musumeci, one team coached by Harrison Gabriel. They're both bantamweight competitors. At the end of the season, they're going to, at the UFC BJJ 1 event, they're going to compete for the bantamweight title. And then there's going to be 2 other title matches where the light heavyweight final contenders face off and the welterweight final contenders face off. So this is a typical UFC Ultimate Fighter style reality show where we have grapplers in 1 or 2 divisions. We've got 2 divisions here. We have grapplers in 2 divisions with that's lightweight and welterweight. They're going to do battle through the season, and then ultimately the final 2 in each division face off. And then, as you know, if you've watched Ultimate Fighter, the grapplers are split off into teams as well. So it'll be Mikey's guys against Harrison's guys. For me, Ultimate Fighter as a concept is a little bit washed. It was 2005 when we had the first Ultimate Fighter season, 20 years ago. And since then, there's kind of been some seasons that have been a little bit more interesting, and I think that's been off the back of the coaches that have been used. So, for example, when Conor McGregor did it 1 year, that spiked a bit of interest in it. But as it is, unless you're a diehard UFC Ultimate Fighter fan, I don't hear much buzz about it. I don't think viewing figures, etc., are like dramatically high. So I would have liked UFC, if they're going into BJJ, to have tried to have done something a little bit different with the format if they're doing a reality show leading up the event. What do you think about that? Do you have ideas of like how they could have gone about it a little bit better, or do you think the Ultimate Fighter format is a great way to go? And then the 2 coaches, again, not that excited about. If the 2 coaches were having a match at the event, you're looking for Mikey to have an opponent, I can understand why you'd get Harrison in for that. I didn't know much about him, but he had a recent performance at the Pans that was really impressive, where I believe he beat Malachi Edmund and Baby Shark. And he's also beaten Zach Kaina at the Euros recently. So definitely a high-level grappler. There's some good names to have wins over, but don't know that much about him. And I'm a jiu-jitsu nerd, so if I don't know much about him, I don't know how like the wider Fight Pass audience, the wider UFC audience, even like the wider jiu-jitsu community outside of nerds and geeks is going to know that much about him. So to have him as one of the main coaches seems like a bit of a strange pick. And then I think Mikey, I know the UFC BJJ promotion has used Mikey a lot in the promotion of the events. I think he was one of their first, if not the first, signings. But I think like two things with Mikey are quite polarizing, and that's one, how he plays jiu-jitsu, and I don't think his style of jiu-jitsu works that well for the UFC platform, because Mikey's very much like sit down and attack the legs. And I think most people looking for combat content on the Fight Pass platform would be looking for a bit more wrestling, perhaps, some scrappier matches, etc. So I think, yeah, his style doesn't lend itself to people outside like a very niche jiu-jitsu bubble. And even within that bubble, I know people who don't enjoy watching Mikey compete that much. And then as a coach, as a public figure, I know some people don't take that warmly to Mikey, and that's fine. Some people don't take that warmly to me, no doubt, watching this podcast. But I think like I was hoping they would come out the UFC as they're getting into jiu-jitsu with like bigger names, more engaging, big personalities, and more of the grapplers at the absolute elite end being involved. So like a Gordon Ryan and Craig Jones heading up the first season of this would have been amazing. As it is, it's not to beat. I just say it's leaving me feeling a little bit underwhelmed. What about the roster of grapplers taking part? Well, in the lightweight, I think like standout names: Keith Krikorian, Gianni Grippo, Isaac Doderlang, Josh Cisneros. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing them compete. In the welterweight, Andrew Taggart, I think, is the standout name. We have Jason Nolf, Andy Varela, Davis Asari. So amongst that sort of guys, there's going to be plenty of exciting matches, but exciting matches don't necessarily move the needle. You know, as we've seen in pro wrestling and the UFC itself. Like just because you put two guys together who are going to have an exciting match, it doesn't mean that like loads of people are going to flock to see it. People like storylines and like personality. So again, with the coaches who they are, don't know what the storyline is going into that other than just giving Mikey an opponent. Personality wise, you know, like Mikey can be divisive. Harrison, like the only content to promote the event I've seen from him was an Instagram reel where he's speaking in Portuguese. So I think that could be a little bit difficult for promotional content if he's not speaking in English. And the main area where this is going to go out is the US, English-speaking country. So we'll see how it does. But yeah, just doing an Ultimate Fighter style tourney with two coaches who are going to have a match that doesn't really mean that much, and then just like some exciting grapplers in it. I don't know. I was hoping, I would have hoped for a little bit more from the UFC. I thought like an idea if Andrew Tackett's involved, and we've seen William Tackett involved with FBI. While they might not have a match with each other, they don't have to have a match with each other at the end of the season. We don't have to do a typical Ultimate Fighter season format, but you could have had the two brothers as opposing coaches. Or you could have had two brothers on one team and then two brothers on another team and them going up against each other. I think the Tackets as well are like better personalities to hang the event on, and I've seen them getting more involved with like breaking down content and stuff like that. So hopefully we see plenty of Andrew on the season. And yeah, I always like watching William compete and being involved with jiu-jitsu programming. So yeah, that's like the UFC road to the title show, starting Monday, June 16, culminating on Wednesday, June 25, where we're going to have a new bantamweight champion, lightweight champion, and welterweight champion. And the Jiu Jitsu Oracle will do its best to stay on top of the season as it progresses and keep you up to date with what's happening. As for the environment and the rules, they've provoked plenty of discussion online. So I think it's fair to say UFC FPI has been heavily influenced by CJI. We talked about that before the last FPI event, where they moved to 3 5-minute rounds with a 10-point must scoring system for the event, which was the format used by CJI last year. I don't know how, like, I still think we're searching for the ideal format for jiu-jitsu, and there might not be an ideal format for competition jiu-jitsu, and it's fine for there being various ideas out there about how to do things. But yeah, it's interesting that UFC now have a similar setup to CJI. But I don't know how helpful it was, because the last FPI event had a very controversial decision in the main event between Fionn Davis and Adel Fornarino, where I thought on the scoring system, having Fionn take it 2 rounds to 1 was absolutely justifiable. But plenty of people thought Adel won. And so the 10-point must scoring system didn't help give a conclusive winner. And then I think the rounds themselves, and there's certainly one round, might have been the end of 2 heading into 3, where the action was getting a little bit interesting. I was kind of invested in how, like, what was happening was going to play out, and then it was time for a break. So not necessarily the best way to go about judging, setting up a jiu-jitsu match. But CGI went that way. Now UFC have done it. Then CGI had what they called the alley last year, which was the environment with the walls that came about initially on Karate Combat in the pit. I think like they had guys striking in the pit and then started to do grappling matches on it. And then we found that it was quite a good area for grappling matches, because one of the most frustrating things in grappling is seeing all the resets, and the pit stops that from happening. But the advantage of the pit versus, or the alley versus a cage, is like the cage with its direct upright walls means you get a lot of wall wrestling. We see that in MMA. It's a completely different game skill set to like grappling on the floor, and it's often not the most exciting place for grappling to take place, although often the floor isn't the most exciting place either, but it lends itself to more action and up against the cage. But the pit wall means that like you're not pinned up against the cage because it's got a slanted slope. So CGI went from the pit into the alley. I think Craig had some sort of arrangement with Karate Combat. He might even have some sort of agreement, some sort of stake in the pit idea. Now, I don't know. What I will say is UFC have now created the Octobowl, which is a very pit / alley like environment. 8 sides, slanted slope, matted floor. So I can see why Craig And then Karate Combat are thinking like, hey, that's our idea. Whether anything can be done about it, I don't know. I think it's going to be difficult. For example, if you look at MMA, we have the octagon, the cage, and while I don't think other MMA promotions are able to infringe on the trademark, on the intellectual property that is the octagon, they can have grapplers compete in cages, just different shapes. So like a circle or a hexagon. So yeah, I think it's more the point that CJI does have the upper hand in saying, yeah, these are some of our ideas, or ideas that out of the two promotions we used first, and now UFC have come along and started using it. But what do you think about the scoring setup and having a pit or an alley or an octagon as an environment? Do you like it, or would you like to see more ADCC style, for example, where it's like mats on the floor, hopefully as big a mat space as possible, and just like straight time? Although in saying that, ADCC has like the time split in two with scoring and not scoring, so, or the other way around. I don't necessarily like that either. I think perhaps just straight time limit, score starts from 0 is better. But anyway, get into the comments, let me know. There's always plenty of different ideas on what the best format is. Another one is like, it's crept up now, and I saw a friend of the pod, friend of Callum and I, Shane Montague, one of the top roosterweight grapplers on the scene, post that we're heading more towards super fight shows, sort of dominating the jiu-jitsu calendar. He much prefers tournaments, and I don't want to try and rephrase off the top of my head exactly what Shay said, and it was on his Instagram stories, but I think, like, to paraphrase and to distill it down, it was basically like, tournaments, you get to see your favorite grapplers in multiple matches, and then you get to see storylines play out across the tournament. And then, because grappling's not MMA, guys can or boxing, where you know, and there's other physical issues to consider as to why people don't compete more than a couple of times a year. Grapplers, you can compete every weekend if you want. Perhaps that's a bit extreme, every other weekend, every month, but certainly much more. There's nothing stopping you in them competing a lot more than 3 times a year. And I think with these super fight shows, guys are starting to compete like a few times a year. I think we've seen it with Mikey has become pretty inactive, maybe less than 10 matches. It's hard to tell. I went on BJJ Heroes earlier, but I think from 2022 to now, he might have had less than 10 matches. He was in one FC, now he's with UFC, and he's very much just been doing like single matches. So it's disappointing when like some of the top guys in the world are competing less and less. If anything, they should be competing more and more as jiu-jitsu hopefully gets more popular. But yeah, that's one thing we'll see with the UFC. Like, they are doing tournaments for these belts heading up to the UFC BJJ 1 show. So hopefully Andrew Tackett, who I'd have as favourite for the welterweight title, hopefully we're going to get to see quite a few matches of him with him over a short space of time. But yeah, talking about, we'll come on to talk about a couple of other shows that are coming up that have super fights on them. So stay tuned, where I'll get into a little bit of a discussion about WNO and CJI 2. But yeah, I just want to like round out the UFC BJJ chat by saying, like, is it a game changer? That's the phrase a lot of people have used who are involved with the promotion, from what I've seen on social media when they're replying to comments, etc. I don't think it is. I think like TKO, the wider company that UFC and WWE are sort of under. I mean, they're very much looking to be involved in MMA. They're in boxing now. They have the wrestling side with WWE. I think like adding Jiu Jitsu is just like another step for them. They're a promotion, a company that wants to make money. I see them looking at Jiu Jitsu and think there's a chance to do that with Jiu Jitsu, but I just think like what they're offering isn't that different to what's out there already. And yeah, my question on the super fight shows would be like, what's next out of this? Are we just going to get guys like competing on shows with like 6, 7, 8 matches? Or are we going to get like sporadic standalone tournaments with just exciting names who are available thrown in the mix? I'm not sure. So, and I don't think I'm alone in my thoughts, because I put up a little poll on the Oracle just to see what the vibe was out there. And again, get into the comments and let me know your vibe. But about 20 odd % were excited. About 63%, the vast majority, were like, it seems okay. I'm happy just to see some more grappling. And about 16% were not bothered. So what I will say is like, there's going to be plenty of interesting content out there online for jiu-jitsu nerds and geeks and fans and followers to have a look at. I think Craig is going to have plenty to say about the UFC in the build up to their event and post their event. He's already had plenty to say if you follow him. I'm sure you do if you're watching this. And I think one interesting thing going forward would be like Craig's been involved in UFC events, cornering for the likes of Volks and Jack Della. So I wonder if he'll say anything when he's actually involved. Not to take away from the fighters he's there with, but you know, maybe post match or something. Like, will we hear Craig mention anything to do with the CJI and UFC BJJ situation? Let's see. All right, a couple of quick notes. CJI 2, we had the 5th gym team announced as PSF or Daisy Fresh. So we've now got New Wave, B Team, Atos, 10th Planet, PSF, Daisy Fresh as like the 5 what I'll call gym teams, and then 3 continental teams: Americas, Europe, and Australasia. PSF going to have Max Hansen at under 66, Dante Leon under 77, Jacob Couch under 88, Michael Pixley under 99, Brandon Reed over 99. Let me know your thoughts on that team. I'd love to get more into it, but I talked a little bit more about UFC BJJ than I imagined, and I think keeping this pod to about under 30 minutes is probably a good idea. So let's just say that's the PSF Daisy Fresh team. Let me know your thoughts on it. Another point from CGI 2 is that Helena Cravar is the first entrant in the women's tournament. There's going to be 4 female grapplers competing, and Helena is the first. Just on that whole women's tournament situation, I think there was hopes that Fionn Davis might be involved, and I don't think she's going to be. And then there was some chat online as to like why maybe not. Does she have an exclusive contract with the UFC? And from what Fionn posted on her Instagram story, I mean, she said she doesn't think that her contract would have stopped her from doing the CGI women's tournament had she wanted to do it. But I think she kind of suggested it was more the timing. Like, this tournament only got announced well after she'd already made plans. As it is like quite close to the event for like the women's tournament to be added. So I think it was more along that lines. But anyway, we know Helena's in. And then there's going to be plenty more CGI to talk from now until the event at the end of August. My co-host Cal will be back in the near future, and we've got plenty of plans for content that we're going to be putting out in the event. But yeah, latest news on that. Daisy Fresh and Helena are both in. And then just a quick note to end this pod on WNO 28. And unfortunately, we don't have Felipe Pena against Luke Griffith in the main event because Pena has apparently suffered an injury. That match has been replaced by Lucas Hawk Barboza against Dore Aoun. But yeah, we've a few other matches. Again, this is like what I just said about a card of matches, we'll call them. I don't think they have to be called super fights. Matches, card of matches that are a bit random in nature. Where John says Gracie against Mika Galvao at the top of the card. And then a couple of other ones that stand out. Kit Dale against Jean J. Ribeiro. Just great to see Kit back on the scene, and he had a really good showing at the CJI Australasia trials, as did Declan Moody, who's taken on Felipe Andrew. But for me, WNO, just a bit of a mishmash of matches. So what I'll probably do is look at the results first and see what's worth watching, and then dive in and watch some of the event. How are you going to go about watching this one? Are you going to watch it through spoiler free, or like me, you're just going to check out what happened and then dive into the exciting bits? Let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's coming up this week, and then in the near future we've got the UFC BJJ reality show, and then final show, or the first show of the new BJJ promotion, UFC BJJ 1, and then it's going to be full steam ahead to CJI 2 at the end of August. So let me know what you think. Is UFC BJJ a game changer? I say not a game changer, and right now I'm a little bit underwhelmed by it, but looking forward to watching the show and seeing what they do with it. But you let me know in the comments what you think, and the Jiu Jitsu Oracle will be back in the near future with more on WNO, CJI, and UFC BJJ.